Hook. Read before you begin. In the summer of 1907, a U.S. military telegraph station in northern Alaska received a final, desperate message from an expedition of 8 men. "We found something alive. It is not human. It has been here longer than the ice." The message abruptly cut off. No reply ever came. Every man on that expedition vanished. For more than a century, the U.S. government sealed every document connected to the incident under a National Security Confidentiality Act, long before such acts even formally existed. The story leaked only in fragments, scattered diaries, missing person notes, and the lone journal page smuggled out by a telegraph officer the night before federal agents confiscated everything. This is the full, reconstructed narrative, pieced together from declassified files released quietly in 2021. Files so strange, so shocking, that historians still refuse to classify them inside any known category of exploration, anthropology, or military history. This is that story. Part 1. The Signal in the Ice. Chapter 1. The Orders No Soldier Wanted. On March 2, 1907, Captain Nathaniel Roebuck, a 36-year-old engineer with the U.S. Army Signal Corps, received an assignment that was not written on official paper. There was no signature, no issuing officer, not even a department seal. Just a thin envelope left at his quarters in Fort Egbert, Alaska. Inside, a single sheet. Assemble a team of 8. Destination, Point Arvik, latitude 71 degrees 27 north. Objective, retrieve or confirm destruction of unidentified metallic structure observed beneath glacial shelf. No written reports, no public logs, no journal entries. Failure to comply will be treated as treason. Roebuck read the paper 3 times. He had served the U.S. Army for 14 years. He had built telegraph lines through snowstorms that buried mules alive, survived a Yukon flood that killed an entire settlement, and once hauled a dying private 40 miles through sub-zero winds on a sled to get him medical care. But he had never received orders without an issuing authority. Point Arvik was not on any official map, not in any frontier catalog, not in native settlement records. In fact, only the Inupiat hunters spoke of it, and only in the winter, when the wind howled so hard it shook the wooden walls of their cabins. They called it Anguikpak, the place that watches, and they refused to go near it. Chapter 2. The Men Who Agreed to Go. Roebuck assembled the 8-man team in 48 hours, not because they were eager, because each of them owed him something, because he had saved their lives, or their careers, or their families. And when a man like Roebuck asked for something, you said yes. The roster. Lieutenant James Holman, 27, surveyor, quiet, carried guilt like an extra coat. Sergeant Elias Ward, 41, frontier veteran, superstitious but impossibly brave. Dr. Arlo Bascom, 33, academic, fascinated with Arctic flora and fauna. Private Samuel Kipp, 19, radio operator, too young to fear anything properly. Corporal Isaac Minter, 29, expert marksman, rumored fugitive from Missouri law. Private Otto Larson, 24, Norwegian trapper turned soldier, knew the Arctic better than Americans ever would. Private Clarence Doyle, 31, mechanic, drank too much and apologized too little. Captain Nathaniel Roebuck, leader. 8 men. None of them knew they were walking into history's strangest disappearance. Roebuck told them only what their orders stated. Metallic structure, possibly a downed device from early polar exploration attempts. We assess no active danger. It was the first lie he ever told them. Chapter 3. The last night before departure. The wind screamed outside the barracks like a living thing. Private Otto Larsen sharpened a knife with slow, rhythmic strokes. "You ever heard of Anguigpak?" he asked Sergeant Ward. Ward spat tobacco into a bucket. "Just stories." "What kind?" "The kind old men whisper so the children shut the hell up and go to sleep." Larsen shook his head. "No," he said. "Those stories are called warnings." Across the room, young Samuel Kipp fiddled with a new telegraph coil. Dr. Bascom flipped through a botanical guide, despite knowing there were no plants where they were going. Lieutenant Holman sat on his bunk, staring at something no one else could see, or maybe something only he remembered. Roebuck entered the room. "All right, gentlemen, get rest. Tomorrow we make history." Boyle grinned. "Or we become it." No one laughed. Chapter 4. Into the White. They left at dawn. 3 sleds, 34 dogs, 8 men wrapped in furs heavier than armor. The cold was so sharp it felt like it sliced the inside of their nostrils. The world around them was a silent, frozen desert. Not white, but 100 shades of blue and silver. The sky looked like the underside of a blade. For 3 days they traveled. On the 4th day, they saw the first sign. Not a structure, not a footprint, not an animal. A perfectly straight groove in the ice, 1/2 mile long and nearly 4 feet deep. Holman knelt beside it. "This wasn't carved by hand or weather," he said. Dr. Bascom ran his gloved fingers along the edge. "The melt pattern is wrong. This was cut with heat, extreme heat." Roebuck stared ahead. The groove led directly toward their destination, Point Arvik. That was when he felt the first moment of fear. Not the kind that shouts, the kind that whispers. Chapter 5. The Structure in the Glacier. They found it at sunset on March 7th. The glacier rose like a blue cathedral wall, hundreds of feet high, and halfway up, encased in ice older than the pyramids, something metallic protruded. It curved like a rib from some massive creature, smooth, silver black, not rusted, not weathered, not human. Holman murmured, "What machine looks like that?" Ward whispered, "That ain't no machine I ever seen." Bascom pressed his faceplate close. "It's warm." That stopped them all. "What?" Roebuck said sharply. "The ice near it is melting from the inside out. This object is generating heat." Roebuck approached. He touched the metal, pulled away instantly. It was warm,
a living thing. And it throbbed, a faint vibration beneath his glove, like a heartbeat. Chapter 6. The Hole.
They camped at the glacier's base. Roebuck examined the structure through a lens as night fell. It extended deeper into the ice, buried perhaps 80, maybe 100 feet. But there was something else. A small opening at the base of the glacier, a cave-like fissure hidden behind wind-blown snow. Larson discovered it first. "Captain," he called, "you should see this." They gathered at the entrance. A narrow passage sloped downward into the glacier. The air inside was warm, not warm like a spring day, but like the breath of something alive trapped in darkness. Holman held up a lantern. The light reflected off something metallic deeper inside. Roebuck made his decision. "We go in at first light." Ward swallowed. "Captain, whatever's in there, it ain't natural." Roebuck stared into the blackness. "That's why we're going in." Chapter 8. Into the Passage. Morning came gray and sharp. Roebuck led the team into the fissure. The tunnel sloped deeper, walls glistening with meltwater. The metallic rib-like structure ran parallel to the passage, as if the glacier had swallowed a massive object and locked it inside. Then the tunnel widened into a chamber. Their lanterns illuminated something no exploratory record had ever described. Rows of metallic pillars arranged in perfect geometric patterns. 8 rows, 8 columns, each the size of a man. Every pillar pulsed faintly, like a slow heartbeat. Ward clutched his crucifix. "Captain," he whispered, "this ain't a ship, it's a tomb." Bascom shook his head slowly. "No, these things, they're biological, or partly. Look at the surface. The patterns are cellular." Kip stepped closer. "Sir, if these things are alive—" Roebuck cut him off. "They're not alive." But he didn't sound convinced, because each pillar had a window, and behind each window was something, a shape, a silhouette, something curled inward as if sleeping or waiting. Chapter 9. The First Contact. Holman touched one of the pillars. A loud crack split the chamber. Ward shouted, "Get back!" The pillar's surface liquefied into a fluid silver sheen. Then it solidified again, and the shape behind the window shifted, just slightly, just enough for Roebuck to know something undeniable. Whatever was inside these pillars was not dead, not even close. Part 2. The Things That Were Not Dead. Chapter 10. The Chamber of 80 Eyes. The chamber held 8 rows and 8 columns, 64 pillars in total. Each pillar contained a window. Each window contained a shape. Each shape was humanoid, but not human. Their limbs were too long, their rib cages too narrow, their skulls too smooth and elongated. They were curled inward, knees drawn to chests, like fetuses preserved in metallic wombs. But the worst part wasn't how they looked. The worst part were their eyes. Every single being inside the pillars had open eyes, wide, black, glossy, unblinking. Dr. Bascom stepped closer than anyone else dared. "These creatures, they're aware," he whispered. "Some kind of suspended animation, cryosleep, but biologically driven." Holman tightened his gloves. "They're not breathing." "No, not like we do. Their bodies might use chemical oxygenation, or something we have no frame of reference for." Ward took a step back. "Captain, we need to leave. Whatever this is, humans have no business seeing it." But Roebuck didn't move. He was staring at the floor, at the grooves carved in the ice, lines connecting the pillars like veins.
He followed the lines with his lantern and found something horrifying. Chapter 11. The Central Pillar. In the middle of the chamber stood a pillar larger than the rest, twice as tall, 3 times as wide, black instead of silver. Its window was opaque, no silhouette visible, but something about it made the air vibrate as though it were humming in a frequency lower than hearing. Roebuck approached. There, engraved faintly on the pillar's base, he saw markings, not scratches, not random patterns, symbols, rows and rows of repeating symbols, but they looked disturbingly familiar. "Kip," Roebuck said softly, "bring your light closer." Kip hurried forward. When the lantern illuminated the engravings, Bascom inhaled sharply. "Captain, these symbols, they resemble proto-cuneiform and early Norse runes, but older, much older." "Older than what?" Ward asked. Bascom swallowed. "Older than any human system of writing ever recorded." Roebuck's voice was steady. "So this object predates human civilization?" Bascom nodded slowly. "Or humanity learned writing from whatever left these marks." A frigid silence filled the chamber. Holman spoke first. "We need to document everything. We can't destroy something like this." Roebuck turned to him sharply. "No, our orders were explicit. Retrieve or confirm destruction, nothing else." "Sir," Bascom said, "you can't be serious. Discoveries like this rewrite history. They change everything we know about—" Roebuck raised a hand. "Doctor, our orders came from someone who doesn't want this knowledge to exist." That made everyone turn cold. Chapter 12. The Movement. Private Larson was standing nearest the smaller pillars. "Sir," he called quietly, "I think something's happening." Everyone turned. The being inside one of the pillars, row 3, pillar 4, had shifted. Its fingers were now pressed against the window. Long fingers, too many joints, like a spider's legs tipped with human nails. And the eyes, the black, glossy eyes, they weren't just open now. They were focused on Larson. "Back away slowly," Roebuck said. Larson did, but as he stepped back, the creature inside the pillar responded. It unfurled slightly, like a waking newborn. Ward grabbed his rifle. Bascom hissed, "Put that down! Don't provoke it!" "That thing's already provoked," Ward muttered. The creature's lips twitched. Ward froze. "So they're alive," he whispered. Bascom nodded. "Alive, aware, and possibly communicating across dreams or hibernation cycles. These pillars may be sensory chambers." "For what?" Doyle asked. Bascom turned toward the giant central pillar. "For that." Chapter 13. Bascom's Theory. Bascom wiped frost off his glasses. "These creatures are not in stasis because they're dying. They're in stasis because they're waiting." "For what?" Holman asked. Bascom gestured to the central pillar. "For that central entity to wake." Roebuck clenched his jaw. "And what happens when it does?" Bascom didn't answer. Instead, he looked up at the chamber walls. Because the ice around them wasn't just ice. It had patterns, too. Shapes that repeated. Circular designs carved in the frozen walls. "Look," he said, "these aren't natural formations." Doyle touched one of the engravings. "It looks like a star map." Bascom nodded. "Yes, a star chart, but the constellations don't match modern maps." "So what?" Kip asked. "So," Bascom whispered, "this map shows the sky as it was 30,000 years ago." A suffocating silence filled the chamber. "Doctor," Roebuck said, "are you saying these things came here during the Paleolithic era?" Bascom nodded slowly. "Long before recorded history, long before any human crossed Beringia, these beings predate human migration into the Americas." Ward swallowed hard. "We shouldn't be here." Chapter 14. The Disappearance of Private Doyle. They set up temporary lights and began mapping the chamber. Bascom sketched diagrams furiously. Holman measured the pillars with trembling hands. Kip tried sending a signal to the telegraph station outside, but got nothing but static. Roebuck was deep in thought when Larson screamed, "Where's Doyle?" The men spun around. Private Clarence Doyle, the mechanic, the loud one who always joked, was gone. His lantern lay on the ice, still burning. Ward crouched down. "The ice here is melted," he whispered. "Not melted like heat, melted like acid. A perfect circular hole, 8 inches across, cut clean through the floor." "What did that do?" Kip gasped. Roebuck raised his lantern. The nearest pillar, row 2, pillar 1, had something new. The being inside it was no longer curled. It had extended one arm outward. Its long, multi-jointed fingers pressed against the window. The glass had begun to liquefy around its hand. Bascom's voice shook. "These creatures can manipulate matter, or generate heat, or reshape molecular structure." Ward raised his rifle. "Captain, permission to shoot it, now." "No," Bascom hissed. "That could wake the others." Ward snapped. "That thing's already taken Doyle." Larson pointed at the hole in the ice. "Doyle didn't fall," he said. "He was pulled." The group stepped back as the ice around the pillars trembled, like something beneath the glacier was shifting, something enormous. Chapter 15. The Message in the Ice. Kip suddenly shouted, "Sir, look!" One of the pillars, row 1, pillar 6, began glowing. Symbols appeared inside it, not carved, projected, words forming in patterns similar to the engravings Bascom had seen. But these symbols were changing rapidly, rearranging themselves, forming new shapes every second. "What's it doing?" Holman whispered. Bascom's mouth fell open. "It's trying to communicate." Roebuck stepped closer. "Translate it." I can't," Bascom stammered, "but it's repeating one symbol more than the others. It might be a warning." Kip stared at the shifting patterns. "It looks like a spiral." Larson shook his head. "No, it's an eye." Roebuck's final word was steady. "All right, we retreat. Everyone, now." Ward nodded vigorously. "Smartest thing you've said all week, Captain." But before they could move, the central pillar pulsed. Once, a deep, resonant thud, like a giant heartbeat. Then again, the ice vibrated violently. Bascom whispered, "Oh, God." Chapter 16. The Awakening Begins. The central pillar's surface shimmered. Lines of light crawled across it, forming runic patterns. The entire chamber trembled. The hum they'd heard the night before returned. Not voices, not whispers, a language, a deep, resonant chant. Roebuck raised his voice. "Everyone fall back, move!" But the passage behind them began to seal, ice flowing like water, freezing solid in seconds. Kip screamed, "We're trapped!" Roebuck turned to Ward. "Shoot the ice!" Ward fired 3 times. The bullets ricocheted. The central pillar pulsed again. Thud. Harder. The smaller pillars responded. All 64. Their windows brightened. The creatures inside began to move. Slowly. Deliberately. Bascom staggered backward. "This is a revival sequence. The central entity is awakening them." Roebuck shouted, "Is there a way to stop it?" Bascom shook his head. "I don't know. This technology is tens of thousands of years beyond us." Kip dropped to his knees and began tapping a telegraph transmitter. "Someone has to hear us! Someone!" Suddenly, the central pillar emitted a piercing sound. Not heard. Felt. A vibration that rattled their bones. The ice cracked. Lights flickered. The symbols rearranged faster than the eye could follow. Then the hum stopped. Everything went quiet. Too quiet. And the black surface of the central pillar opened. Just slightly. Enough for something inside to move. Enough for Roebuck to see one impossible truth. The thing inside wasn't asleep. It had been waiting. Part 3. The Thing in the Black Pillar. Chapter 17. The Opening. The chamber fell silent in the most unnatural way imaginable. Not the silence of emptiness, the silence of anticipation. A breath held by something ancient. The black pillar in the center, larger than all the others, pulsed once more with a low, vibrating thud, and then a line split down its middle. Not a crack, not a fracture, a controlled, precise opening. Frost curled outward from the seam like white smoke. Ward whispered, voice trembling, "Everyone get back, get back!" But no one moved. Every man stood rooted, watching the impossible unfold. The split widened. Inside the pillar, darkness seemed to move, not lightless, but alive, shifting like oil. Roebuck grabbed Holman's shoulder. "Flash the lantern inside." Holman raised his lantern with a shaking hand. The moment the light touched the interior, the darkness inside recoiled, folding inward like a creature startled. Larson gasped. Kip stumbled back. Even Dr. Bascom lost his words. Because inside the black pillar wasn't a body. It was a void. A space that bent the lantern light around it. A space that swallowed illumination. A space that had depth but no outline. And then something reached outward. Chapter 18. The Hand That Was Not a Hand. A shape pushed from the void, pressing against the opening of the pillar. At first it looked like a limb, long, slender, jointed in too many places. But then it shifted, bending in ways bones should not bend. A hand? A tendril? A limb made of darkness? No one knew. It wasn't solid, wasn't liquid. It looked like a shadow cast by something not present. Kip screamed, "It's not touching the ground!" He was right. It floated, hovering above the ice, yet pressing against the world as though gravity was optional. Roebuck raised his rifle. "I swear on everything holy, Captain. Tell me to shoot it." Roebuck opened his mouth, but the darkness limb suddenly snapped back into the pillar, retreating like a startled animal. The void pulsed once. Then a sound emanated from within. A deep, glacial groan, like a mountain shifting, like the earth itself inhaling. Bascom whispered, "It's waking. It's aware we're here." Roebuck didn't speak. He was staring at something else behind them. Shadows were moving inside the smaller pillars. Not the void, but the creatures. They were waking too. Chapter 19. The Awakening of the 64. The beings suspended in the smaller pillars began to move in synchronized rhythm. First their fingers twitched, then their limbs uncurled, then their eyes, those black reflective eyes, shifted simultaneously toward the humans standing in the chamber. The sound that followed was subtle, a soft clicking, like ice cracking under gentle pressure. But it was coming from all 64 pillars. Click, click, click. Bascom grabbed Roebuck's coat. "Captain, this is not a revival. This is a coordination. They're connected." Roebuck swallowed hard. "How connected?" The doctor pointed toward the central pillar. "As organs are to a heart." The 64 beings lifted their heads, all at once. The chamber temperature rose sharply, ice dripping like melted wax. Holman wiped sweat from his brow. "It's getting hot," Larson muttered. "It's like they're investing the environment." Bascom nodded. "They're adapting the chamber to their awakening state." Ward snapped, "In English, Doc. They're turning the room into a habitat for them, not us." Roebuck realized something else. They're not just waking, they're communicating with the one in the center. The central pillar pulsed again. Once. The 64 pillars responded. Click, click, click. In patterns, in rhythm, in language, a call and response. Kip dropped his telegraph equipment and backed up. Captain, this isn't a tomb, it's a command center. Chapter 20, The Scream from Below. A sound erupted beneath the chamber. Not a hum, not whispers, not machinery. A scream, a deep, resonant wail from far below the ice, so loud it vibrated through their boots, rattled their teeth, and made their bones ache. The men collapsed to the floor, screaming, covering their ears. Bascom shouted through the noise, "This is a wake signal. It's activating the entire structure." Roebuck gritted his teeth. "What's down there?" Bascom lifted his head, face twisted with terror. "The rest of it. This chamber is just the top. Whatever crashed here, it's enormous." The ice floor rippled, cracks spreading like lightning. Larson scrambled backward. "It's rising! Something's rising!" And then the central pillar stopped pulsing. Dead silence. The 64 creatures froze mid-motion. Ward exhaled shakily. Did it stop?" Bascom frowned. No, it paused. It's waiting for something. Roebuck scanned the chamber. Waiting for what? A single pillar, row 5, pillar 2, glowed brighter than the others. Symbols appeared on its glass window. They were different this time. No spiral, no eye, a new symbol. Ward squinted. What the hell is that supposed to mean? Bascom breathed one chilling word. Organism. The symbol meant organism, and it was pointing at a specific one. At Doyle, the missing man. Chapter 18, Doyle's Return. The ice behind the glowing pillar cracked. A fissure spread across the floor. Slowly, deliberately, like something was pushing from below. Kip screamed, "Something's coming up!" Ward raised his rifle. Larson grabbed an axe. Holman stumbled backward. Roebuck stepped in front. And then a hand burst from the ice. A human hand. Doyle's hand. Frozen, white, fingers twisted unnaturally. Bascom lunged forward. "Wait! Don't touch him!" Too late. Ward grabbed Doyle's arm and pulled, and Doyle came free. But it wasn't Doyle, not anymore. What rose from the cracked ice was the shape of Private Clarence Doyle, but wrong. His skin was pale as bone, his veins glowed faintly blue, and his eyes were black and glossy like the creatures in the pillars. He opened his mouth. No breath, no air, no voice. Just a clicking, click, 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 in the same rhythm as the pillars. Ward stumbled back. "Jesus Christ, what did they do to him?" Bascom whispered. "He's not dead. He's been altered, integrated." Roebuck raised his lantern. "Doyle, can you hear me?" The figure tilted its head, slowly. Click, click, click. The pillars responded. All 64 beings clicked in return. The central one pulsed. Thud. Doyle's body stiffened. Then he turned, not toward Roebuck, but toward the central pillar. He dropped to one knee, as though bowing. Larson whispered, "It's using him, like a mouthpiece." Bascom nodded. "It needs a biological intermediary to communicate. It's using Doyle." Roebuck stepped forward. "Doyle, if any part of you is still alive, give me a sign." The figure of Doyle raised its head and spoke, not with a voice, but through the clicking, which suddenly formed patterns glowing on the pillars. A message.
Bascom's eyes widened. "Captain, it's answering you."
Chapter 22. The First Translation. The glowing symbols shifted, rearranged, repeated. Bascom scribbled furiously in his notebook. Ward hissed, "Doc, tell us what it says." Bascom shook. I'm trying. The symbols translate roughly to, "We have waited. We have endured. We remember. The sky fell. We slept. The world moved. The world changed. Our return is required." Silence. Kip stammered, "Return? Return to what?" Bascom continued. The next line. He swallowed. "You will prepare the way." Roebuck's hand tightened on his lantern. "No, absolutely not." Doyle's altered head snapped toward him, eyes empty but aware. The clicking intensified. Symbols flashed faster. Bascom translated, "Prepare or be replaced." Ward raised his rifle. "I'll blow that thing's head off." The chamber shook violently. Pillars lit up. The central void pulsed. Roebuck shouted, "Ward, don't!" But the sergeant fired. A single shot. The bullet hit the glass of one pillar, and the pillar ate the bullet, absorbed it, liquefied it, then expelled it as molten metal. The chamber roared. The symbols flashed like fire. The ancient machinery woke fully. Bascom screamed, "You've triggered a defense response!" Roebuck grabbed Ward. "Run, now!" But something blocked their way. Something rising from the ice. Something massive. The rest of the object buried beneath the glacier was waking up. Part 4. The Ice Takes Everything. Weddell Sea, Antarctica, November 1915. The world had become white, silent, endless. After abandoning the Endurance, Shackleton's men set up camp on a drifting ice floe they named Ocean Camp. Their ship, once a fortress of hope, was now a splintered carcass, groaning in the crushing grip of the pack ice. And yet, the men kept looking back at it, because it still looked alive. The last moments of the Endurance. On November 21, 1915, a sound cracked across the frozen plain, a deep, booming roar like a giant exhaling his final breath. The Endurance rolled sideways, masts twisting, hull splintering. The men stood in silence. No one spoke. Shackleton finally said, "She's gone, boys." The ship that had carried their dreams into the Antarctic was swallowed by the ice. All that remained was them and the endless white. Life on a drifting world. The ice floe beneath their tents was not land. It was a floating slab, cracking, shifting, drifting toward the open sea. Every few hours, a low, thunder-like rumble beneath their feet, a new crack opening somewhere in the night. The men slept fully dressed, boots on, knives ready, sled dogs tied close, because the ice could break at any moment and drop them into the black, freezing abyss. Food becomes the enemy. Once their supplies ran low, they hunted seals. Sometimes they ate blubber straight from the kill to survive the cold. Frank Hurley wrote in his diary, "We are little more than animals now, cold, hungry, and drifting." Worse, the dogs were starving too. A decision none of them wanted was coming. A leader's burden. Every man felt despair. Every man doubted. Every man feared the coming winter. Except Shackleton. He hid his fear behind calm command. He smiled even when he was starving. He joked even when he knew death was near. Because he understood one truth: if he broke, the whole expedition would die. The ice tightens its grip. The floe drifted farther north, slowly, unpredictably. Some days it moved a mile, some days 5, some days it spun in circles. Their world was now a floating island of death. Shackleton gathered the men. We march when the floe breaks, prepare everything. They began organizing tents, food sledges, boats, and dogs. A new journey was coming, one even more dangerous. But before they could march, something happened. One night, the ice beneath them exploded open, splitting the entire camp in half. Men screamed, dogs barked wildly, tents collapsed, supplies tumbled into the icy water, and Shackleton shouted only one command: "To the boats! Save what you can!"
Part 5. The night the ice turned against them. Weddell Sea, Antarctica, December 1915. The night was silent, too silent. A cold mist rolled across the frozen plain as the men slept inside their canvas tents, unaware that beneath them the entire world was about to crack open. Then it came, a deep, violent boom. Not the sound of wood, not the groan of pressure, but the sound of a world breaking in half. The floe splits. The entire camp jerked sideways. Hurley woke first, his tent collapsing onto his face. McNeish shouted, "The ice! It's opening!" A jagged fracture tore straight through Ocean Camp, splitting tents, gear, and men into two drifting halves. Black water surged up, bubbling like a dark, hungry mouth. Dogs howled, supplies slid toward the opening, men stumbled in panic. And in the chaos, Shackleton's voice cut through the night. "Everyone to the boats!" The James Caird, the Dudley Docker, the Stancomb Wills, their last hope, now scattered across cracking ice. A battle in the dark. Men hauled boats on their shoulders, sometimes leaping over widening cracks. Others dragged crates of food through knee-high slush. Frank Wild and Tom Crean jumped across a 5-foot gap to rescue the remaining dogs. Then the ice lurched again. Another crack. The floe shuddered like an earthquake. A wall of water surged up, drenching the camp. For a moment, the men thought the entire floe would flip over, crushing them beneath tons of ice. But it settled, barely. The most dangerous moment yet. With the ice shifting under their feet, someone shouted, "The James Caird is stuck! She's sliding into the water!" Shackleton and 5 men sprinted across the unstable floe. They grabbed the boat's rails as the ice beneath it collapsed. If they lost the Caird, they lost all hope of ever reaching land. With a final heave, they pulled the boat onto firmer ice, seconds before the fracture widened into a roaring black channel. The men collapsed, gasping. They had won this round, but the ice was not finished. The march must begin. Shackleton could see it clearly now. The floe was dying. It wouldn't last another week. He gathered the men at dawn, faces pale, soaked, exhausted. "We march toward land," he said. "Pack all essentials, abandon the rest." They left behind books, clothes, tools, scientific samples, personal treasures, even Hurley's photographs, kept only negatives he could carry. Every ounce mattered. A frozen funeral. Before leaving Ocean Camp, they faced the hardest decision of all: the dogs. Food was nearly gone. The march would be impossible with starving animals. The men built a small snow wall. Behind it, the dogs were put down, quietly, respectfully. Frank Wild wept openly. He didn't care who saw. They had lost their ship, their home, their world, and now their loyal companions. The long march begins. Dragging 3 boats and 50 days of food, the men began marching across the shattered, rugged ice. Every step was a battle. The ice buckled and heaved. Patches of thin ice threatened to swallow them. Open leads forced detours miles long. Some days they advanced only 2 miles, some days less than 1. One diary entry captured the mood.
We are ghosts pulling dead weight across a dead world. But Shackleton kept them moving. He walked at the front, every day, every step. If he could move, they could move. Ahead lay a faint hope. Paulet Island, a tiny volcanic rock with a food cache left years earlier. If they reached it, they might live. If not, the ice would take them all. Part 6. The Road of White Torture. Drifting Ice, Weddell Sea, January 1916. The march was killing them. Not quickly, not dramatically, but slowly, like a dull knife carving away at their strength, hope, and sanity. The ice ahead stretched in a brutal, jagged maze, ridges as tall as houses, slushy sinkholes that swallowed boots, hidden cracks that snapped open without warning. Every step felt like walking on the roof of a collapsing world. The death of forward motion. On the 6th day of marching, Shackleton called a halt. The men collapsed into the snow, panting. Frank Wild stared at the map, eyebrows tight. "We've gone less than 4 miles. He blinked again, hoping he was wrong. He wasn't. Tom Crean slammed his fist into the ice. Hurley cursed under his breath, and McNeish, muttering loudly enough for all to hear, added, "We're not marching to land, we're marching in circles." Shackleton said nothing, but he knew the carpenter was right. The ice drifted west faster than the men could walk east. Their march was being erased by the ocean beneath them. They were losing a race they didn't even know they were running. The men began to break. The exhaustion was becoming dangerous. Greenstreet collapsed twice, pulling the Stancomb Wills. Holness vomited blood from overexertion. Ord-Lease, terrified of falling into a crack, tried skiing alone, then fell into a slush pit and had to be hauled out by 2 furious shipmates. The dogs were gone. The rations were shrinking. The ice drift was undoing every victory. Even Shackleton admitted in his diary, "Our progress grows pitiful. The men's morale hangs by a thread." The storm that hit that night finished the job. The tent pole snapped in 90-mile-per-hour winds. Snow filled the sleeping bags. The sound was a constant roar, like the scream of an angry god. By morning, half the men said the same thing. "We cannot do this anymore." Mutiny whispers. Carpenter Harry McNeish, exhausted and freezing, confronted Shackleton near the boats. "The contract's void," he said. "The ship is gone. You cannot order us as sailors anymore." It was mutiny, spoken softly, but mutiny all the same. Shackleton stepped forward, face inches from McNeish's. No shouting, no insults, just 6 quiet words. "My authority ended with the ship? No." He looked him dead in the eyes. "It ends when we are home." McNeish lowered his gaze. Everyone heard the exchange. No one challenged Shackleton again. But the truth remained. The march had failed. A decision that saved their lives. That evening, Shackleton gathered the men. The wind howled like a living creature around them. Frost clung to their beards. Their clothes were stiff with ice. Shackleton spoke calmly. "Gentlemen, we stopped marching. We must go with the ice, not against it." The men stared, some relieved, some terrified. He continued, "This floe is drifting toward open water. When it breaks, we sail for Elephant Island." Wild frowned. "Elephant Island? There's nothing there." Shackleton nodded. "Then nothing is better than dying here." The decision was bold, risky, desperate, but it gave the men something they'd lost weeks ago, a direction. The floating prison. The next morning, they built a new camp on a thicker floe. They called it Patience Camp. No name ever had been more accurate. Their new routine? Eat, Sleep, wait for the ice to break. Days turned into weeks, weeks into months. The floe drifted north, carrying them like prisoners inside a moving cell. They watched the sun circle the horizon without setting. They listened to the groaning ice like a heartbeat beneath them. They waited for the ocean to open and swallow them. And then, one night in March, they heard the crack. Not small, not distant, but close, very close. Their world was splitting apart again. And this time, there was no land beneath their feet. Part 7. The night the world opened beneath them. Patience Camp, March 31, 1916. It began with a tremor, a soft vibration under the sleeping men, like someone dragging a hand across a frozen drum. Then a pop, then a crack, and then the night exploded. Boom! The ice split down the middle, straight through Patience Camp. Tents folded, the stoves toppled, boxes of food slid toward a widening black maw. Crean was thrown out of his sleeping bag. Hurley leapt to his feet, shouting, "The floe's breaking! Get up! Move!" The men burst out of their tents in a panic, stumbling across the shifting ice. Some slipped. Some were nearly swallowed by cracks opening like jaws under their boots. Shackleton was already running. "To the boats!" he shouted. "Everyone to the boats!" This time it was not a drill, not a scare, not a partial fracture. The entire floe was disintegrating. The scramble into darkness. The 3 lifeboats had been kept ready day and night. The James Caird, the Stancomb Wills, and the Dudley Docker. Now the men rushed toward them as the floe tilted, water surging over the edges. Some men waded through knee-deep seawater. Others leapt over cracks that widened with every heartbeat. McLeod fell waist-deep into a gap. Crean and Kerr grabbed him by the arms and hauled him to safety. Wild shouted, "Drop everything except food and boats. Move!" Sleeping bags were abandoned. Scientific notes were left behind. Gear was thrown aside. But every man made it. They reached the boats, just in time. Behind them, Patience Camp, their home for 3 months, crumbled into the sea with a deep, hollow thunder. Everything they had built, everything they had endured, vanished in minutes. The opening sea. Dawn revealed a terrifying sight. The floe they stood on was no more than a raft, a few hundred yards across, surrounded by swirling black water and drifting slabs of ice. Nowhere to march, nowhere to camp. Only one direction remained. North, into the ocean, in 3 open boats, through the world's most violent sea. Shackleton gave a simple order. Launch the boats. They pushed off. The moment the boats hit the water, the cold bit like a knife. Their clothes froze stiff. Spray turned to ice instantly. It was like rowing through a graveyard. Massive icebergs towered on all sides, creaking and groaning like giants waking from sleep. The waves were big enough to swallow the boats whole. And the men were starving, exhausted, cramped, numb. But they rowed anyway, because there was no alternative. The battle begins. The Dudley Docker led. The James Caird followed. The Stancomb Wills struggled at the rear, the smallest and lightest. The boats dodged ice floes drifting like huge white knives. One wrong turn could crush a boat to splinters. Shackleton stood at the tiller of the Caird, shouting directions. "Starboard, row hard. Ice ahead, turn. Hold her steady, wave." The men rowed until their hands bled through their gloves. Green Street collapsed twice. Clark's lips turned blue. Blackborough, the frost-bitten stowaway, could barely sit upright. Each hour felt like a day. Each wave felt like a fist. A nightmare that wouldn't end. For 2 days the storm chased them. Wind, snow, freezing spray, roaring seas. They bailed water non-stop. If they stopped for even a minute, the boats would flood. Ord Lees wrote later, "The sea tried every moment to take us. It is only by lunacy or God that we survived." Their goal, Elephant Island. Desolate, rocky, uninhabited, unknown, but land. If they reached it, they might live. If not, they would disappear into the Antarctic Sea. 3 wooden boats swallowed by waves taller than houses. Shackleton prayed silently they could hang on, because the worst was still ahead. The final 48 hours when the ocean turned completely against them.
Part 8. 7 days in the mouth of hell. At sea in 3 open boats. April 1916. The ocean did not welcome them. It attacked. The moment the 3 lifeboats left the safety of the floe, the Weddell Sea revealed its true nature, a monstrous boiling wilderness of black water, white spray, and towering waves that rose like cliffs. The James Caird rose up the face of a wave, paused at the top, and dropped. Slam! Frank Worsley gripped the gunwales with white knuckles. "If this keeps up," he shouted over the roar, "we'll be matchsticks in an hour." Shackleton said nothing. Words meant nothing in a sea determined to kill them. They rowed, bailed, shivered, endured. For 7 days they fought a battle no human had the right to win. The sea that tried to eat them. By day, the sun glared off the ice, blinding them. By night, the boats nearly vanished into the black troughs between waves. Salt sores opened on their skin, their lips cracked and bled, their hands blistered until the blisters tore, leaving raw flesh that stuck to the oar handles. They slept in 5-minute bursts, leaning on each other like corpses. Food was a handful of cold, wet biscuits. Water was melted ice, barely enough to keep them conscious. The smallest boat, the Stancomb Wills, came close to sinking twice. At one point, a wave crashed over it, burying the men in icy water. Crean shouted, "Bail, you devils! Bail!" They bailed until the boat was light enough to float again. Every hour was a miracle. The whirl of death. On the 3rd day, the boats encountered a deadly obstacle, the Weddell Sea swirl, a huge current that spun like a horizontal whirlpool, pulling ice, boats, and anything unlucky enough to drift into it. The Dudley Docker was the first to feel the pull. Its stern dipped, then the bow tilted sideways. Hurley shouted, "We're going in!" Shackleton reacted instantly. He ordered every boat to row directly across the current, using the swirling momentum to slingshot out. It was suicidal, but it worked, barely. When they cleared the current, the men allowed themselves 10 seconds, just 10 seconds of exhausted sighs. Then the seas attacked again. The miracle of the elephant. On the 7th morning, Worsley peered into the haze. His vision was weak. He hadn't slept in 2 days. He blinked, rubbed his eyes, looked again, and shouted, "Land! Land ho!" Men sat up like they'd been shocked with electricity. Even the half-conscious stirred. Black peaks rose through the fog, jagged, cold, violent-looking, but solid. Elephant Island. They'd been drifting on ice and ocean for 497 days. For the first time, real Earth stood ahead. Some men cried, some laughed, some simply stared, unable to believe it. But the sea wasn't finished. It threw one final storm at them,
its deadliest. Waves hammered the boats, 2 nearly capsized. The Caird took on so much water the men had to form a human chain, bailing non-stop. Worsley said later, it was as if the sea, furious at losing us, had chosen to destroy us at the very moment of our salvation. But then, a break in the surf, a rocky beach, a narrow gap between cliffs. Shackleton shouted the only order that mattered, "Run her ashore!" The boat surfed on a giant wave, shot forward like arrows, and crashed onto the pebbled beach. The men leapt out, stumbling, crawling onto land. Some kissed the rocks, some cried, some simply collapsed. After 497 days lost in ice, they had reached land. But the story was not over, not even close. Part 9. The Island of Despair. Elephant Island, April 1916. They were alive, but barely. Elephant Island was not a paradise. It was a frozen, howling wasteland, hammered by constant storms coming off the Southern Ocean. The men were frostbitten, starving, and shaking uncontrollably. Worst of all, no ship sailed this far. No whalers, no trawlers, no fishing boats, nothing. If they stayed on Elephant Island, they would die on Elephant Island. Shackleton knew it instantly. That first night, huddled under upturned boats, he told Wild, "We must leave. We have no chance if we stay." Wild nodded. He understood. Only one boat was strong enough for a long voyage, the James Caird. Shackleton had a plan so insane the men couldn't believe it. Sail 800 miles across the world's worst sea in a 22-foot open boat to find rescue in South Georgia. It was the only plan. The impossible preparation. The James Caird was dragged up the beach. McNeish reinforced the hull with makeshift ribs using wood from the other boats. A canvas deck was added to keep out spray. Ballast stones were gathered. Rations were counted. A few sacks of biscuits, some tins of pemmican, 6 sleeping bags, tiny barrels of water, just enough for 6 men. Those 6 would make the journey. Shackleton, Worsley, Crean, McNeish, Vincent, McCarthy. The strongest, the smartest, the most unbreakable. The rest, 22 men, would remain behind under Wild. Shackleton said before leaving, "Start building a shelter. We'll be back for you." Wild smiled, a hard, confident smile. "Boss," he replied, "I know you will." While Shackleton sailed into death, Wild kept the men alive, killing seals, burning blubber, rationing food, performing amputations in the cold. He told them every morning, "Pack up, boys, the boss will arrive today." They believed him because they had no choice. Part 10. The greatest boat journey in human history. The James Caird Voyage, April to May 1916. They launched into a gale, not a breeze, not a rough sea, a roaring, freezing, mountainous storm. The Caird dove into swells 40 feet high. Spray froze on the canvas deck until the boat weighed half a ton more. For 14 days they saw no land, only black water and blacker sky. They navigated by stars, and when clouds hid them, by instinct. Worsley wrote, "Navigation was guesswork elevated to art." Crean bailed water for hours at a time. Vincent and McNeish nearly died from exposure. Shackleton never slept more than 5 minutes at a time. On day 14, Worsley shouted, "I see it! South Georgia!" A razor-toothed silhouette on the horizon. They cried, laughed, collapsed. But the sea, furious to lose them again, sent one last storm. The Caird nearly capsized twice. They fought for 48 hours straight, rowing through madness. When at last they touched land, Shackleton stumbled out and collapsed face first into wet sand. For the first time in 522 days, they were on safe ground. But they had landed on the wrong side of South Georgia, and the whaling stations were on the opposite side, across an unmapped, lethal mountain range with no rope, no tent, no climbing gear. But Shackleton said, "We go." Part 11. The Last Mountain. South Georgia Crossing, May 1916. Shackleton, Worsley, and Crean launched at dawn. Snowfields, vertical ice slopes, hidden crevices, freezing fog. They climbed non-stop for 36 hours, not a single break. They slid down ice chutes, waded through freezing streams, nearly died crossing a corniced ridge. On the final ridge, as the sun rose, they heard it. A whistle. A factory whistle. A sound of civilization. A sound of rescue. The three men staggered into the whaling station at Stromness, dirty, frozen, hair matted with salt and frost, faces hollow. The whalers gasped. One said, "My God, do you know how long you've been given up for dead?" Shackleton replied, "Please, my men, we must get them, all of them." Part 12. Every Last Man. The Rescue. August 1916. It took 4 attempts. Sea ice blocked the first 3 rescue ships. Each failure broke Shackleton's heart. He barely slept, barely ate. He stared at the horizon like a man haunted. Finally, in August, the Chilean vessel Yelcho broke through. They reached Elephant Island through swirling fog. Wild and the men stood on the beach, thin, battered, frostbitten, but alive. Wild squinted at the ship.
A voice shouted, "Are you all well?"
Wild grinned.
"We are all well, boss!"
Shackleton counted. 1, 2, 3, 20, 21, 22. Every single man alive. The impossible had happened. Epilogue. The legacy of the unkillable crew. They endured 2 years in the most hostile region on Earth without losing a single man. It remains the greatest story of leadership, survival, and human endurance in recorded history. Historians still marvel. A ship crushed, a march across breaking ice, a death-defying lifeboat journey, an 800-mile open-boat voyage, a mountain crossing without equipment, a final rescue with 0 casualties. Shackleton never reached the South Pole, but he achieved something far greater. He brought all 27 of his men home. No leader has ever done more for his crew. And in the frozen silence of Antarctica, the story of the Endurance lives forever.